Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. Dodgers in the Zone with your host, Jim Smiley. Jim, how are you?
Boy, I'm doing great, Ralph. It's been a tough little month of October here so far, but, hope springs eternal, so.
Yes, it always does. And hope. What do you suppose, and I'll get right to the nasty part of it, what do you suppose is the main reason the Dodgers just performed as they did? Was it the manager? That's such a subjective question, I know. But what's off the top of your head?
Well, I think, to address, first of all, the manager, because that's usually the easiest target. I think a lot of times any of us who follow baseball are really driven by emotion. And if we got into a little bit better reason, we'd realize that any big league manager has a lot more data than we could ever hope to have, and much more than we understand. And I have great faith in the Dodger front office, and that certainly extends to manager Dave Roberts. And I think that he probably made some decisions that if we had the same data, we would be making similar or exactly the same decisions. So I don't think really it's Roberts' fault at all, and I don't think he's lost the clubhouse or is failing to communicate in any of those ways. And I think while a change might be in order at some point, that point is definitely not now.
Okay.
But as far as like what happened, I think it's really a surprise to anyone who followed the Dodgers closely that they did win 111 games. I mean, that really puts them in elite territory there, with only 3 teams in the history of baseball winning more.
And what are those 3 teams? I know that the Indians in '54 won more, or the same? Was it 111?
The Indians in '54 did win 111, just like the Dodgers, and of course they lost to the Giants in the World Series, with the remembered mostly for Willie Mays' great catch off Vic Wertz's drive there. So the Indians won 111.
And Dusty Rhodes came up with a remarkable World Series. I was 8 years old, living in New York, a Giant fan. So you brought back great memories for me. Thank you.
8 years old is about the best time when those guys are heroes, and I don't know if it gets a whole lot better.
Absolutely. It never did get better than that as a baseball fan for me. It came close with the '69 Mets. It did come very close with the '69 Mets. But, wow, when you're a kid, you're a kid. And wish we were that again, I'm sure.
Well, you never look at the game the same as you do when you're a child. And Rhodes was, I think he only he played in just 3 games and had the 2 home runs and just really came up big. And it's something I can only read about and imagine. But New York in the 50s is just one of the best places to be for baseball ever. I think there, and maybe Philadelphia for a while, when the A's and the Phillies were going, with maybe Chuck Klein and Jimmy Fox, would be a good time too. But I think getting back to the Dodgers. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to interrupt 1 second. On a future podcast, you and I should have an expert on the Dodgers' move from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. And we have a number of them that I could think of on this network, and they'd be a good guest. So let's tuck that away for the future.
I think that'd be an easy one to have. As you mentioned, those Indians won 111, and then you've got the 98 Yankees, the 2001 Mariners, and the 06 Chicago Cubs. And only that Yankee team won the World Series. So a fabulous regular season does not always translate to a World Series title. The Dodgers were really built for that regular season. The organizational depth lets them perform quite well over that 162-game marathon, and they needed it this year. You had so many different problems with the starting pitching, headlined by Walker Buehler and Dustin May, pitching in a combined just 18 games during the year. And I think that when you look at that postseason, you really need, in the condensed series of a postseason NLDS there, you need your starters to go deep in games. And in the 4 games that the Dodgers played the Padres, the Dodgers starters totaled just 16 1/3 innings in 4 games. And I think you saw that the Padres were the hotter team, the team with better starting pitching. And the Padres just flat out outplayed their neighbors to the north there.
They were terrific, and then they lost to the Phillies. So go figure. I mean, theoretically, with normal wild cards, the way it's been before, the Phillies wouldn't have been in there at all.
I think that's good for baseball. Think of, I imagine what it must have been like before divisional play in 1969, and if your team's out of it, they're out of it, and it might be early, and your season could be over a few months into the season. Whereas now there's so many different ways that you can look at it that make teams feel like, and their fan bases feel like, they're still competitive and they've still got a shot not only for the postseason but for the World Series, just like the Phillies, as you mentioned, being a wild card club. So as much as I'm a traditionalist and I think that big 162-game season should be rewarded, I think that the wild card and the expanded playoffs is really good for baseball and good for the fan bases.
I appreciate that because there are 30 teams. And back when there were 8 teams in the league, you could have a pennant race, and the second-place team was just that. It puts more emphasis on the season. But you can't do anything about it. There are playoffs are big bucks for baseball and the baseball union. So it's not going to go back. The advertising isn't going to go away. Is there a better playoff system as you see it than there is now?
I think that there is a better baseball playoff system. I don't know what it is, but I do believe that the game will figure it out and they'll continue to tinker with it. I think this format where you gave the upper hand to in the wild card round where 3 home games were played, that's a positive. Giving the division winners with the best records would appear to be a positive. It didn't play out that way with 3 of the 4 teams losing after a long rest, but I'll bet that it does change. I'll bet that it does change.
Yeah, okay, in some way. Were you happy? Is a fan happy if his or her team, doesn't go all the way, but it doesn't necessarily take it to the end? But do they look back and say, wow, this is a great season. We made the playoffs, 111 games or whatever amount of games. In a fan's mind, when they look back upon the season, how do they put it into perspective? Is it a loss unless you go all the way, like the Yankees used to have that philosophy? You tell me.
Well, I think that fans, and especially in the day of instant opinions with the megaphone of social media, often look at it in a failure. And I think if we took a look at it in a more enlightened way, the Dodgers have made the playoffs more than 10 times in a row here, and they've come away with just yeah.
Right. And if you're listening, Bernie Rose, my Dodger friend and podcast associate, give him a break on some level. I wanted to hear that from you. That kind of thinking. Hey, I think
it goes deeper.
Okay.
That thinking goes deeper. I think you may not even have to give them a break, but I do think that fans should acknowledge that for that 10-year run, it's been a wonderful time to be a Dodger fan. And it's been a time where they're competitive, where the winning percentage is so high that you're really enjoying that regular year. And it's, you go from April till the beginning of October with pleasure and a little bit of angst, but it's been a wonderful time with so much enjoyment to be a Dodger fan. And you can blame them and you can say, gosh, the team's only come away with one world championship. But as far as enjoyment of being a fan, it has been an incredibly wonderful time. And I think that fans sometimes forget that for pure enjoyment and pure engagement of the game and being into it, this is a golden time of Dodger baseball.
It's a dynasty in the same way that the Braves went basically unrequited in 10 years. They got one also, but they were a dynasty. Poor man's dynasty, but a dynasty. Yeah. Let's put it that way. What do you look for next year? What are the changes going to be as you see it?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot. The Dodgers right now only have 7 players under contract. And with those 7 players, you've got $90 million committed. So a lot of flexibility. They have a team option on Justin Turner for $16 million that has to be decided within 5 days after the World Series. You've got Clayton Kershaw, who's a free agent, and those two guys have been around a long time, and I would look for both of them to be back. I think that the front office definitely is playing three-dimensional chess while fans play checkers and want big names or big splashes, and they're looking a few years ahead at any given moment with who's coming up, who they have in the pipeline, how the prospects are doing, when the prospects that they don't believe in but are ranked high might be at the best value. And I think you're going to see a pretty good turnover here with the Dodgers. But shortstop, I think, is the biggest key because Trey Turner is, in my opinion, unlikely to sign with them. And, he and Tommy Davis are the only batting champs to suit up for Los Angeles. And I don't know how that's going to work out. And you've also got to look at that pitching staff. Tyler Anderson is also a free agent. He went 15-5 with a 2.57 last year. And it'll be interesting to see who comes back. But I think the shortstop position, you've got some intriguing free agents in addition to Turner. You've got Sander Bogarts and Carlos Correa and Dansby Swanson. And you've got an in-house candidate there with Gavin Lux if they want to turn him loose every day. And that's going to be an interesting play. And between that and the pitching staff, that's where I think the team will focus and we might see the most changes.
Okay. Before we get to what you were intending to talk about today, which is very important to me, let me ask you the key question of the day. Is Aaron Judge, sweepstakes, probability, possibility, How does it look?
I don't think Aaron Judge signs with the Dodgers. I think there's no time in his career that he has more leverage to sign with someone. I think the Yankees would be highly criticized if they were to let him go. I don't know Judge personally at all. I've never interviewed him. If he's worried about legacy at all, maybe staying in New York might be his best bet. I would think that he's already pretty close to generational wealth, and even if he signs, no matter where he signs, he will be after this contract. And there's a lot about the fan base in New York, a lot about Judge's legacy that really makes me hope he signs back with the Yankees. And I think he's 31. I just don't see the Dodgers willing to do what it takes, and I don't think they should either. I just don't see that as a smart signing.
Okay. Well, I happen to believe that he'll go to the Giants, or at least I hope he'll go to the Giants or the Mets. But he wants to go to San Francisco from all reports. But
sure, he's a Fresno State product and grew up by the Bay.
Right. And sees the advantage of living in California, in the Bay Area, this, that, and the other thing. It's not a right or wrong, but it's an is. And but it would be great as a Mets fan. But it's his decision ultimately. So, to be young, not so young, 31, you say, and to have his future is great. Earlier in the year, I was for not signing him when it was a question, because he hadn't been healthy for a stretch of time.
Right.
You gotta go.
No, I don't. I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, good.
I'm good.
Then let's get to Connie Mack and the article that you sent me that was intriguing. Talk about that, if you would.
Well, most fans know Bill James as a sabermetric superstar. He's really kind of pushed sabermetrics into the forefront, and was hired by the Boston Red Sox to be a part of the organization. But Bill James called Connie Mack's move in the 1929, quote, the most brilliant managerial stratagem in the history of baseball. And the more I started to research it and get into it, I just got fascinated by the story. As it played out, the 29 Athletics were really one of the best teams the sport has ever known. They had guys like Jimmy Fox and Mickey Cochran and Al Simmons in their lineup, and they finished 18 and a half games ahead of the Yankees, who had won 6 of the last 8, the previous 8 AL pennants, and they were a formidable club offensively, and on the mound they had Lefty Grove and a guy by the name of George Earnshaw, who led the league in wins that year with 24 victories. And they were really coasting to the pennant, kind of as we were talking about earlier. When you're up in the standings and only one team from your league goes to the postseason, you can coast. And they were ahead of the second place team by 10 and a half games by August 1st. So they were kind of just strolling to the playoffs, as were the Cubs with Hack Wilson in the National League. And they weren't without their issues. The 35-year-old Howard Empke, who a few years earlier had a 20-win season and pitched a no-hitter, he was kind of wavering. And in today's game, he'd be used a little bit more effectively. But back in those days, resting and any kind of load management was really frowned upon. And Empke needed a lot of time between his starts. And in mid-August, he got blown up against the Yankees. He allowed a bunch of runs in the first inning, and in the second, he allowed a Babe Ruth grand slam, and all totaled he hit. He allowed 8 earned runs without completing the 3rd inning, and Mac was really dismayed with him and wondered if his heart was in baseball anymore. And the way the story goes, it's, baseball, one of the things I like about it more than any other sport is that it has so many myths. And, for crazy baseball historians who are into it a little bit too much, and I guess I'd put myself in that category, you always hear about how Mac threatened to release Emke and send him on his way and end his career. And I was fortunate enough to pick up a 4-page handwritten letter from Connie Mack dated a few days after Emke got blown up by the Yankees. And the content of the letter is just really fascinating to bring this myth to life. And Mac told him, essentially, your heart's not in it. I don't want you to travel with the club. You've got a decision to make. And if you can pitch once a week for us and be competitive, great. But if not, it's okay if you stay home. And at that point, Emke, can you imagine that? Can you imagine telling a big leaguer, it's okay, stay at home?
And imagine a big leaguer having to hear it and putting ego and all the things that are human in people into it. Wow, that's a big part of it. That's a crapper get off the crapper or whatever moment. Yeah, I wanted to be kind. Should have get off the pot. How about that?
That's it. I just can't imagine it.
Yeah, for me, reading it, I couldn't equate the Connie Mack that we all look back upon, the Don during old man, the pictures of him in the dugout in his suit, Philadelphia A's days. I couldn't imagine his personality being showing through like that. He wasn't the person I thought he was, and I am horribly disappointed. No. But am I right about that? Was that how you pictured him to be, just from what you knew before getting acquiring the letter?
Well, you've got to remember that Mac, he was a catcher in the 1800s, and he comes to prominence and goes in partners with Scheib to own and run the Athletics. But to be a guy who runs a major league team, even then, and manages it and manages the financial side of it, Mac had to be a brilliant guy. And his little dynasty there with Home Run Baker and Rube Waddell in the early times, and then having to sell it off
and then get it back. Yes. Build it again. Yes. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I thought of him as more grandfatherly-like, and that letter was a shock, is all. Now, man does what he has to do in business. I could appreciate that. But human relation, that guy should have gone through his HR.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Mac hatched the plan. The letter was written in the early part of August, and Mac looked at his schedule, and from the 15th to the 24th, the Cubs, who were coasting to the NL Championship and who the Athletics would meet in the series, were playing 11 games nearby Philadelphia. So he told Emke, go watch the Cubs play the Dodgers in Brooklyn, the Giants in New York, and go watch the Cubs play the Phillies in Philadelphia. Go scout them, chart the pitches, do everything you can, and figure out not only how we as a team are going to beat them, but also how you as a pitcher are going to beat them. And Emke and Mac kept this plan silent. And when it was finally time for Game 1 of the World Series, everybody throughout baseball wondered whether Mac would start Lefty Grove or George Earnshaw. And Max started Emke, who had only pitched 2 games since August. And fans were so upset with him and wondered what he was doing and thought that he was letting sentiment and emotion cloud his decision-making. And Emke went out after having all this knowledge about how to carve up the Cubs, and he responded by setting the World Series record and striking out 13 Cub batters. And to put this in perspective, Chicago had scored the most runs in the major leagues in 1929, and he quieted them through 8 innings. And when the game was decided, the Cubs had pushed across a meaningless unearned run in the 9th inning. And the game set the tone for the Athletics World Championship. And crazy enough, it's Emke's last big league victory in his career.
Whoa. That is a story. Now, did you come across these letters or did you acquire them? Are you a collector per se?
Well, to get to the origin of the story, many of us collected baseball cards at an early age, and by the time I got to be a teenager, I had really kind of soured on baseball cards, thinking that anybody with a quarter could go down to the drugstore and buy a pack. And Ty Cobb's family flooded the market with his canceled checks, and they had a Ty Cobb autograph, of course, on them. And I was washing cars for $2 a car in the neighborhood, and I saved up $40 and bought a Ty Cobb signed check. And from then on, I kind of got hooked on the idea of collecting Hall of Fame autographs. And throughout the 80s and into the 90s, before the craze got really pronounced, I acquired guys like Cobb and Babe Ruth and Christy Mathewson and Gehrig. And today, the collection has every major leaguer who debuted. Every major leaguer was in the Hall of Fame who debuted since 1900, except for 3 guys. So I've got a lot of feelers out in the collectible world, and when a meaningful letter like that hits, a lot of times I'll get a call and an offer will be made, and sometimes I'm really fired up about it, and I've got to have it, and sometimes the price is too high and I don't get it. But I get fired up about some really silly stuff in terms of buying scraps of paper with dead guy signatures on them.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Continue your story. I interrupted.
Well, the story kind of ends there with Emke getting his last win, but little footnote on Emke. When he retired, he came up with the idea of, he wondered what he could do to save infields during the rain in baseball games, and he developed a canvas tarp and then founded his own company called Emke Manufacturing, and he produced the first baseball tarps that go over fields. And wouldn't you know it, the first major league club that purchased his tarps was Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. So kind of a neat footnote to wind that up.
And that's what goes through a baseball fanatic's head, ladies and gentlemen. And there is nothing sweeter to my ear than stories like that. Now, not only, and I'm a big baseball nut, I never heard of the man, Emke.
Yeah, right.
Is that is he more commonly known than me never hearing of him? I don't know, but what a great story, Jim. Hey, listen, debut podcast, not bad. Dodgers in the Zone. Host Jim Smiley. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Thank you, Ralph. Always great chatting baseball with you.
That's music to my ears. I've told you that before. We are both of the same ilk, and that's Walter Mitty's And thank you. This was fun, as it always is. And thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all. Jim Smiley is terrific. Adios. Happy trails.